You want to jump to the Sixers here?
Yes.
All right. So currently second in the division, but have been about as hot as anybody over the last, what, like
Month.
25 games, which
Yeah.
is not an insignificant sample. Um, the Sixers are another team that you could make the case they don't really need anything. I do think, they're another backup big team that's been, they're looking for an upgrade on on B-ball Paul Reed or other things like that. I think for me, the target ought to be someone who will give you what you thought Daniel House Jr. was going to give you. Because I remember, we probably talked about it, getting him is like, well, this guy might finish games for them in the playoffs. That's totally on the table. And he just hasn't been quite good enough, which is okay because D'Anthony Melton has been as advertised and,
Yeah.
everybody else in the rotation has been solid. I think, I don't know what the bottom line would be for this team is other than it seems pretty clear they would like to get under the tax. And they have a couple ways to do that, including moving Furkan Korkmaz or Jaden Springer. Matisse Thybulle is someone that I think is going to have maybe a surprising amount of appeal to different teams because every time I see him mentioned in a rumor like to the Kings or to Golden State, it's like, yeah, absolutely. Take a flyer on that guy, especially if you're a good team that just needs defense and can compensate for his deficiencies with other players. So they're limited in what they can move. Their first rounders are pretty well tied up for the rest of the decade. And they're just a little bit, it's not like they have to do a ton to get under the tax. It's like a 1.1 million, or I think maybe 1.2. So yeah, they may just be a tax ducking team, which might be disappointing, but I do think they're another team like Boston that doesn't need to do a whole lot. So I guess I'll throw it to you. I think probably Korkmaz is the most likely player to be traded, but there are some other candidates. I wonder where you're at on that.
They're so close to ducking the luxury tax. Like, if that's the move, is it easier? It is easier. I mean, to just be like, hey, we'll trade Jaden Springer to someone who makes 2.1 this season, 2.2 next season, and has the team option on his fourth year, which at this rate, I would argue he's tracking toward having that declined, rather than Korkmaz is owed 5.4 million next season, guaranteed. So like, I could see it being something like that. Is it even just, oh, we'll give you Shake Milton? If they're just purely ducking the tax and don't want to include any sweeteners, I think you're probably looking at a Shake Milton or maybe a Jaden Springer, even though or do you need a sweetener to get off Jaden Springer
Right.
at this point? Otherwise, I would think if you're the Sixers, I would rather get rid of Korkmaz and pay the opportunity cost to jettison him, just because that then gives me more wiggle room under the tax, which will help you during buyout market season, depending on how many players you need to sign. You want more than just like a half breath under the luxury tax.
Yeah, and Korkmaz too is I think maybe again, I don't know. It's possible a team could think, well, this guy at 5.4 million next year might help us, if he can make shots and just be the better version of Korkmaz. We've seen several versions over the years, but I do think if you're trying to actually make an improvement, his salary is the biggest of any guy they'd reasonably consider trading. So that's a factor too. I know, you've got a trade here that involves him and he kind of has to be in it to get to the number you need. Springer won't do it. And Thybulle probably could, but on his own, I don't know if he's bringing back
Oh
someone,
yeah, I didn't even mention him. Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
You
So
could trade him into cap space though, right? Like, that's
sure.
not cap space, but you could get a team just to take Tybal. That's not going to take a sweetener.
Well, yeah, I would think it depends. So one of the things I've seen recently is to the Tybal to the Kings for Terrence Davis. Terrence Davis kind of duplicative with Malik Monk on the roster. I mean, he has finished some games for them, but I think I've read that he's not super happy with his role. There's just not enough minutes for him. I guess you could talk yourself into him having a better chance of being in the playoff rotation than Tybal, just because you're not going to just ignore Terrence Davis off the ball, so he could have some value there. And for the Kings, like Jesus, get a wing defender there, just get one. Like we're not talking about them, but that's the glaring need, and Tybal can do that. So, it makes sense to me, something like that. But yeah, I think in most cases, Tybal is not someone you'd have to sweeten anything to move him, just because he does have a demonstrable NBA skill. It just doesn't really matter that much for the Sixers relative to how much it might matter someplace else.
The trade that we have for them. So there's going to be two because I have one that I was kind of bandying about in my head. They're, by the way, they're $1.1 million into luxury debt. They're ducking it. Like that is
Yeah,
happening.
yeah.
Even if they make sort of a win now move, they're ducking it. So the trade that I have listed though, the Sixers get Cody Martin, the Hornets get Furkan Korkmaz, Matisse Thybulle, and a 2028 second round pick. And that gets the Sixers under the tax. While also Cody Martin's been bad this year, still dealing with knee issues. When I proposed this, he was actually back in the lineup. I think they creeped up again. He would be interesting for the Sixers long term if you're comfortable with the number he's on.
Yeah, and I think they should be comfortable with that because that gets you, if you're thinking about step laddering of not necessarily immediately, but over time, Martin makes he makes like seven, something
Yeah.
roughly. So that gets you a little closer to like a $10 million guy if you're talking about salary slots for trades and things like that. So I mean, if I'm the Sixers, I think I probably do that. And if I'm the Hornets, like I think I'd be interested in a flyer on Tybal and a second is fine, but Martin just hasn't played for them. And Martin's not, I don't think Martin is the type of guy that it's like at a team in Charlotte's position, we're starting over essentially, or we should be eventually. Like he's a decent piece on a better team. I think he makes more sense for the Sixers team than he does for the Hornets. Whereas Tybal is the opposite. So I'm into that. What's your other trade?
So Tyrese Maxey, Tobias Harris, Matisse Thybulle, and I guess you could include their 2029 first here, but it wouldn't be guaranteed.
Right.
It would just because of the way that the pick that goes to Brooklyn is protected. And not wait, their Brooklyn pick's not a 2028 pick, is it? It is no, it's a 2027, but it's protected through 2028. So it would have to just be 2029. If it's not going to convey, it turns into nothing. To Toronto for Gary Trent Jr., OG Anunoby, and Kem Birch. It basically is Tyrese Maxey enough to get you in the OG Anunoby conversation.
That's the question. So Maxey, for what the Raptors lack, is interesting because I don't know. He's not. I think of him more as like a slasher, a transition guy, than someone who's just going to run your half court offense really effectively.
That's a good point. You're not wrong.
What they need. But like, and we'll talk about this, if the 3 and 4 really good first round pick packages are not there for Anunoby, then I think someone like Maxey that is young enough and projectable enough and currently cheap enough to give you some more flexibility elsewhere, because there's other guys on the Raptors roster that are going to cost some money even if Anunoby's gone. I think that's the type of player you target. I also don't know if I want to take on Tobias Harris's money.
Just a year.
But yeah, no, that I think a lot of that depends for me on what else is out there for Anunoby if I'm the Raptors.
I would think Tyrese Maxey to me has the evaluation of 2 first round picks.
That's fair. But so then where does Anunoby fall? How many? I mean, we should probably save this for.
I mean, it depends on what first round picks are coming back. But yeah, so I don't think I would do that if I was the Raptors, but I just think Maxey's coming off the bench now. Do you trust that James Harden and Joel Embiid are hunky-dory? And just curious as to like the fact that he's coming off the bench, would it make it more likely that, you like the other thing I thought, like, would you do Tobias Harris and Tyrese Maxey for Zach LaVine and Alex Caruso?
Oh, man. That's interesting. I kind of like that one from the Sixers perspective. I do wonder, though, if you mentioned Harden, like if the Sixers are not 100% confident that he's not going to go to the Houston Rockets inexplicably or leave or whatever, and you've traded Maxey, like who's dribbling the basketball for you?
I don't think it'll happen. I think they could get themselves into some interesting discussions if he was on the table, though.
For sure. Yeah, agree.